Jasmine Wright stands frozen in the airplane aisle, blood trickling from her split lip, surrounded by 6 armed black men in suits with earpieces. Behind her, wealthy heiress Karen Blackwell trembles, handcuffed to an armrest, mascara streaking down her face as the pilot announces an emergency landing. Before we dive into this shocking story that will change your perspective on air travel forever, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about justice being served in unexpected places. Now let's find out how a routine first-class flight turned into an airborne nightmare with consequences nobody saw coming. The morning had started with such promise for Jasmine Wright. At 26 years old, she was already blazing trails in the corporate world, a brilliant MBA graduate from Howard University with a future as bright as her keen intellect. Standing at the gate in JFK Airport, she cut an impressive figure in her understated Burberry blazer and tailored slacks, expensive but not flashy, the kind of quiet luxury that spoke of confidence rather than ostentation. Her natural hair was styled in a sleek professional updo, and a pair of modest diamond studs, a graduation gift from her father, adorned her ears. Boarding pass for first class in hand, Jasmine was headed to Los Angeles for a critical business meeting. As the newly appointed Chief Operating Officer of Skyward Innovations, her father's tech empire, she was leading negotiations for an acquisition that would cement the company's dominance in the artificial intelligence sector. The weight of responsibility sat comfortably on her shoulders. She'd been preparing for this role her entire life. First-class passengers for Flight 1872 to Los Angeles, you may now board, announced the gate agent, and Jasmine collected her carry-on, a sleek Tumi suitcase containing her presentation materials and a change of clothes. She smiled politely at the agent as she scanned her boarding pass and proceeded down the jetway. Settling into seat 2A, Jasmine arranged her workspace efficiently. MacBook, presentation notes, company portfolio, everything within easy reach. She noticed a few sidelong glances from other first-class passengers as they boarded. Nothing obvious, nothing she could directly call out, but she recognized those looks. The subtle double takes, the quick assessments, the slight narrowing of eyes that seemed to ask, does she belong here? Jasmine was used to it. Even as the daughter of Malcolm Wright, whose rise from the poverty-stricken streets of the Bronx to becoming a tech billionaire was the stuff of American legend, she encountered these microaggressions regularly. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind, "Your excellence won't shield you from prejudice, Jazz. In fact, it might make some people resent you more." The first-class cabin continued filling with the usual mix of business executives and wealthy travelers. Jasmine observed them with practiced discretion. Timothy Howard, a middle-aged white man in an expensive but rumpled suit, who nodded at her with professional courtesy as he took his seat across the aisle. Layla Patterson, a stylish white woman in her 30s who smiled warmly at Jasmine before settling into her seat with a best-selling novel, and Professor Andre Davis, a distinguished-looking black man in his 50s who caught her eye with a look of subtle solidarity as he stored his briefcase overhead. The relative calm of the boarding process was shattered by the arrival of Karen Blackwell. She swept into the cabin like a hurricane in designer clothing, her voice carrying throughout the space before she was fully through the door. "I specifically requested 2B, not 3B, she snapped at the flight attendant trailing behind her. "Do you know who I am? This is completely unacceptable." Karen Blackwell was the archetype of wealthy entitlement, expensively maintained blonde hair, liberal application of luxury cosmetics, and clothing that seemed designed primarily to display the logos of high-end designers. Multiple rings adorned her manicured fingers, and a Hermes handbag swung from her arm like a weapon. Behind her followed a harried-looking assistant struggling with Karen's excessive carry-on items. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Trent, maintained a professional smile despite Karen's rising volume. "I apologize for any confusion, Mrs. Blackwell, but our system shows you were assigned seat 3B. "I'd be happy to." "Well, your system is obviously wrong," Karen cut him off, her gaze already sweeping the cabin and landing on Jasmine. Her eyes narrowed. "What about her? Is she supposed to be here?" Trent glanced at Jasmine apologetically. Ms. Wright is correctly seated in 2A. Perhaps I can offer you a complimentary beverage once we're airborne to make up for any inconvenience. Karen's lips thinned to a disapproving line. Fine. Whatever. She turned to her assistant. Tracy, put my things up and then go find your seat in economy. She settled into 3B with a dramatic sigh, immediately pulling out her phone despite the cabin door being closed. Yes, Brittany. You won't believe this. They've downgraded me on this flight. No, the standards are really slipping these days. They're letting anyone in first class now. Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward Jasmine as she spoke, voice deliberately loud enough to be overheard. Jasmine took a slow, deep breath and focused on her laptop screen. This wasn't her first encounter with someone like Karen Blackwell, and it certainly wouldn't be her last. Her father's journey had prepared her for this. Malcolm Wright had built skyward innovations from nothing, creating revolutionary software that had transformed digital security before expanding into multiple tech sectors. Every step of the way, he'd faced people who couldn't see past his skin color to recognize his genius. As flight attendants made final preparations for departure, Jasmine noticed something unusual. 6 black men in impeccable suits boarded last, taking seats scattered throughout first class. Each wore a discreet earpiece, and though they didn't acknowledge each other, there was something synchronized about their movements. They moved with the hyper-awareness of trained security personnel, their eyes constantly scanning, bodies relaxed but ready. Jasmine frowned slightly. Her father was protective, but this seemed excessive even for him. She wondered if there had been new threats she wasn't aware of, making a mental note to text him once they were airborne. As the plane began to push back from the gate, Karen continued her loud phone conversation until a flight attendant firmly requested she switch to airplane mode. With an exaggerated eye roll, she complied, but immediately pivoted to engaging her seatmate, an uncomfortable-looking Timothy Howard, in one-sided conversation. Do you fly this route often? I'm heading to my husband's charity gala in Beverly Hills. James Blackwell, perhaps you've heard of him. Blackwell Oil. We're hosting the governor next week at our Dallas estate. The plane taxied toward the runway as Karen's voice droned on, a soundtrack of privilege that Jasmine had learned to tune out long ago. She pulled up the presentation she'd be delivering in LA and immersed herself in the work that really mattered. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, the cabin settled into the rhythms of long-haul flight. Flight attendants moved efficiently through the aisles with drink service, the gentle hum of the engines provided white noise, and passengers adjusted their seats and entertainment systems for maximum comfort. Jasmine accepted a sparkling water from Trent and returned to her work, occasionally making notes on her tablet about potential questions the acquisition team might ask. The deal was complex, a $50 million investment into a promising startup with revolutionary algorithms. She was determined to make her father proud. 3 rows behind her, Karen Blackwell was making her presence known with increasing volume. I'll have the Dom Perignon, she informed the flight attendant. And keep it coming. My husband's oil company just closed a $10 million deal, so we're celebrating. She flashed her diamond-encrusted wedding ring for emphasis. Only the best for a Blackwell. Jasmine ignored the conspicuous display of wealth, familiar with people who measured their worth by the price tags of their possessions. Malcolm Wright had taught her that true wealth was measured by impact, not ostentation. Despite their billions, the Wrights lived relatively modestly, focusing their resources on innovation and philanthropy rather than displays of excess. The cabin hit a patch of turbulence, causing the plane to lurch unexpectedly. Jasmine's water glass tipped slightly, sending a small splash onto the armrest between her seat and the aisle. She quickly grabbed napkins to blot the spill, but not before a few drops landed on the floor near Karen's designer handbag, which she'd placed beside her seat in violation of stowage regulations. Oh my God! Karen shrieked, snatching up her bag. Look what she did. This is a $15,000 Birkin. It's ruined. Jasmine turned, napkin still in hand. I'm so sorry about that. The turbulence caught me by surprise. I don't think any water actually touched your bag, but if it did, I'd be happy to cover any cleaning costs. Karen clutched the bag to her chest, eyes narrowed with suspicion and contempt. As if you could afford it. Do you have any idea what this costs? More than your entire outfit, I'm sure. The casual cruelty of the assumption hung in the air. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one intervened. I understand it's valuable, Jasmine replied evenly, maintaining her composure. And as I said, I'm happy to take responsibility if any damage occurred. Trent appeared with additional napkins. Let me help with that spill. Is everything all right here? No, everything is not all right, Karen snapped. My bag is potentially damaged, and I'd like to be moved to a different seat, away from these people. She gestured vaguely toward Jasmine and Professor Davis. The implication was unmistakable. Around the cabin, reactions varied. Some passengers became suddenly engrossed in their screens or magazines, pretending not to notice. Layla Patterson frowned openly at Karen's behavior, while Timothy Howard stared straight ahead, visibly uncomfortable but unwilling to engage. I'm afraid we're fully booked in first class today, Trent replied, his professional demeanor intact despite the tension. But I'd be happy to take a look at your bag if you're concerned about damage. Don't bother, Karen huffed. Just keep her water away from my things. She shot another glare at Jasmine before adding, I don't know why I'm surprised. Some people clearly aren't used to nice things. Jasmine had reached her limit. Turning fully to face Karen, she spoke clearly but calmly. Ma'am, I understand you're upset about the water, but your comments are crossing into disrespectful territory. We're all trying to have a pleasant flight here. Karen's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? Are you speaking to me? Who do you think you are? Someone deserving of basic courtesy, just like everyone else on this plane, Jasmine replied. Karen scoffed. Look, honey, I don't know if you're confused or what, but this is first class. Did they upgrade you from economy? Or is this some kind of welfare program United is running now? Professor Davis cleared his throat. That's enough. Your comments are inappropriate and offensive. Mind your own business, Karen snapped at him. I'm having a private conversation. At a volume the entire cabin can hear, Layla Patterson interjected coolly from her seat. Trent stepped between the rows. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to remind everyone that United has a policy of respectful behavior toward all passengers and crew. Please keep conversations civil or conduct them privately. Jasmine nodded at Trent and returned to her work, determined not to let Karen's bigotry derail her preparation. She had faced discrimination before and would likely face it again. Today was too important to be sidetracked by ignorance. Karen, however, wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone and, despite being in airplane mode, pretended to make another call. Brittany. You won't believe what just happened. I'm surrounded by completely ghetto people in first class. The airline has really gone downhill. Yes, exactly. It's like they're letting anyone in these days if they can scrape together enough miles. Throughout the cabin, the 6 men in suits remained alert, their attention now clearly focused on the developing situation. One made brief eye contact with another, a subtle nod passing between them. Though they hadn't moved from their seats, there was a new tension in their posture, the coiled readiness of trained professionals evaluating a potential threat. Nearly an hour into the flight, Jasmine closed her laptop and stood to use the restroom. The cabin was relatively quiet now, most passengers had settled into movies or work, the initial drink service completed. She moved carefully past her row and into the aisle, nodding politely to Trent as she passed. As she navigated between rows 2 and 3, Karen suddenly extended her leg into the aisle. Jasmine, caught mid-step, stumbled but managed to catch herself on a nearby seat back. The move was so deliberate that several passengers looked up from their activities. Jasmine steadied herself and turned to face Karen directly. Did you just try to trip me? Karen's face was a mask of exaggerated innocence. I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you should watch where you're going. You deliberately put your foot in the aisle as I was walking past, Jasmine stated, her voice level but firm. That's not only childish but potentially dangerous. Oh, here we go, Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. Playing the victim already. So typical. Excuse me. Jasmine's eyebrows rose. You know exactly what I mean, Karen continued, her voice rising. Always looking for racism where there isn't any. I was just stretching my leg. By now, the entire first-class cabin was watching the exchange. The atmosphere had grown thick with tension, passengers shifting uncomfortably in their seats. One of the suited men subtly adjusted his position, maintaining a relaxed posture but clearly monitoring the situation. I didn't mention race, Jasmine pointed out. You did. I simply asked why you tried to trip me. Karen's laugh was brittle. See? This is exactly what's wrong with society today. You people always jump to accusations. Professor Davis stood up. Ma'am, your comments are inappropriate and uncalled for. This young woman has done nothing to provoke this kind of treatment. Stay out of this, Karen snapped. It's none of your business. When you make a spectacle in a public space, you make it everyone's business, Layla Patterson interjected, her phone now subtly positioned as though she might be recording. Karen's face flushed with anger. Do you even belong in first class? She demanded of Jasmine. Or did someone buy this ticket for you? Because you certainly don't look like you could afford it. Jasmine took a deep breath, painfully aware of all eyes on her. I'm an executive at Skyward Innovations. I'm flying to LA for business, just like many people on this flight. Not that I owe you any explanation. Skyward? Please, Karen scoffed. I know people who work at Skyward. Executives don't look like you. Jasmine reached into her blazer pocket and produced her company ID badge with her photo and title clearly displayed. Chief Operating Officer, she stated simply. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to use the restroom without being assaulted. Karen's eyes narrowed at the ID. Anyone can fake a badge. I know what real executives look like, sweetie. My husband employs dozens of them. Jasmine replaced her badge and continued toward the restroom without another word, maintaining her dignity despite the humiliating public confrontation. Inside the small lavatory, she took a moment to collect herself, looking in the mirror and remembering her father's advice, their ignorance doesn't diminish your worth. When she returned to her seat, Karen was engaged in loud commentary to Timothy Howard, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. It's just about standards, you know. There was a time when first class meant something. When people had to earn their way here through hard work and success, not through whatever affirmative action program they're running these days. Jasmine put on her noise-canceling headphones and returned to her work, though her concentration was shattered. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Trent and another flight attendant in hushed conversation near the galley, occasionally glancing toward Karen with concerned expressions. One of the suited men discreetly touched his earpiece and murmured something inaudible before typing on his phone. Within moments, the other security personnel checked their devices almost simultaneously, a choreographed response that went unnoticed by most passengers. Jasmine's phone vibrated with a text message from her father. Everything okay on your flight? Darius says there's a situation. So her father had sent security after all. Jasmine typed back quickly. Just a racist passenger making a scene. Nothing I can't handle. Did you really put a security team on my flight? Malcolm's response came seconds later. Always, Jazz. Visibility makes you a target. Stay calm, let them do their job if needed. I'll handle it. Jasmine frowned at the phone. While she appreciated her father's concern, his protective measures sometimes felt stifling. She was a grown woman who had dealt with racism her entire life. Did she really need an entourage of bodyguards watching her every move? Her thoughts were interrupted by Karen's increasingly loud voice. She had noticed Jasmine's Patek Philippe watch, a gift from her father on her appointment as COO, and was now making a new accusation. That watch is worth more than $100,000. There's no way she bought that herself. I'd bet anything it's a fake. Or worse. The implication hung in the air, stolen. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop several degrees as passengers recognized the dangerous territory Karen was entering. One of the suited men shifted in his seat, hand moving slightly toward his jacket before stopping himself. The situation had reached its boiling point. Jasmine decided to speak with the flight attendants about changing seats, hoping to defuse the situation before it escalated further. She stood again, careful to move quickly past Karen's row toward the galley where Trent was preparing the meal service. "Excuse me," she began quietly. "I was wondering if there might be an empty seat anywhere else in the cabin. The passenger in 3B is creating an uncomfortable environment." Trent nodded sympathetically. "I'm so sorry about her behavior, Ms. Wright. We've been monitoring the situation. Unfortunately, we're completely full today, but I can speak with the purser about running away." Karen's voice cut through their conversation as she appeared behind Jasmine. She had followed her to the galley, her face flushed with either alcohol or anger, possibly both. Typical. When confronted with the truth, just leave. Trent stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to return to your seat. We're preparing for meal service." Not until she explains that watch, Karen jabbed a finger toward Jasmine's wrist. "Because I know for a fact that a young black girl doesn't just casually own a watch worth more than most cars unless something shady is going on." The galley fell silent. Even Trent seemed momentarily stunned by the blatant racism. In the main cabin, passengers were turning in their seats, straining to see the confrontation unfolding. "Ma'am," Jasmine said with remarkable composure, "I don't owe you any explanations about my possessions. Please return to your seat and leave me alone." "Don't you ma'am me," Karen hissed. "I know your type. Acting all proper and professional when you're probably just an affirmative action hire. What did you do to get that job? Sleep with the boss?" "That's enough." Trent interjected firmly. "Return to your seat immediately or I'll have to report this to the captain." Jasmine took out her phone. "Perhaps you should know who you're insulting before making wild accusations. My father is Malcolm Wright, the founder and CEO of Skyward Innovations." Karen's eyes widened briefly before narrowing with suspicion. "Prove it." Jasmine swiped through her photo gallery and displayed a recent picture of herself with her father at a company event, both in formal attire, her father's arm proudly around her shoulders as they stood before a Skyward Innovations backdrop. "That could be anyone," Karen scoffed, though her voice held a hint of uncertainty. "I know Malcolm Wright. He wouldn't have a daughter like you." "You don't know him at all," Jasmine replied, maintaining her composure despite the mounting insults. "Now please, this conversation is over." Karen's face contorted with rage at being dismissed. In a sudden movement that shocked everyone present, she slapped the phone from Jasmine's hand, sending it clattering to the floor. Before anyone could react, she followed with a second, more vicious strike, an open-handed slap across Jasmine's face, her diamond rings cutting into Jasmine's lip. The sound of the slap seemed to echo through the cabin. For a heartbeat, complete silence fell. Jasmine stood frozen, a trickle of blood forming at the corner of her mouth where Karen's ring had split her lip. The pain was sharp, but the shock was greater. In all her experiences with racism, no one had ever physically assaulted her. The stillness shattered as 6 men moved in perfect coordination. All rose simultaneously from different sections of first class, hands reaching inside their jackets. The lead man, tall, powerfully built, with close-cropped hair and watchful eyes, reached them first. "Step away from Ms. Wright immediately," he commanded, his deep voice cutting through the shocked silence as he displayed an ID. "Darius Johnson, head of security for the Wright family." The other 5 security personnel formed a protective perimeter around Jasmine, one gently guiding her away from Karen while another retrieved her phone from the floor. Their movements were practiced, efficient, and unmistakably professional. Karen's expression transformed from rage to confusion to fear in rapid succession. Security? What is this? She attacked me. I want her arrested. Darius ignored her protests, speaking instead into his wrist microphone. Situation contained. Principal has sustained minor injury. Request immediate landing for medical attention and removal of assailant. The passengers watched in stunned silence as another security team member produced plastic restraints and secured Karen's wrists to her armrest despite her loud protests and threats of lawsuits. Trent had rushed to the cockpit to inform the pilots, and within moments, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a security situation in the cabin, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Denver. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for arrival." Karen's face had drained of color as the reality of her situation began to sink in. "You can't do this. Do you know who my husband is? James Blackwell will destroy all of you." Another security team member held up a phone, Malcolm Wright's authoritative voice filling the small space. "This is Malcolm Wright. My daughter Jasmine is the Chief Operating Officer of Skyward Innovations and was traveling on your flight when she was assaulted. I want the assailant arrested and charged upon landing. My legal team is already preparing to contact both the airline and the FBI regarding this hate crime. Do you think Karen deserved what happened to her, or was the security team's response too extreme? Comment number 1 if you believe Karen got exactly what she deserved for her racist behavior and physical assault. Comment number 2 if you think the security team overreacted by diverting the entire flight. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about justice being served in unexpected ways. But what happens when the plane lands? Will Karen face serious consequences, or will her husband's wealth and influence protect her? And how will this incident affect Jasmine's important business meeting in LA? Let's continue with this shocking story. Descent beginning in approximately 10 minutes. Prepare the cabin for landing. The captain's voice sounded tense over the intercom system as the plane began its unscheduled approach to Denver International Airport. Throughout the cabin, a mixture of emotions rippled among the passengers, confusion from those in economy who had only heard rumors of a situation in first class, frustration from business travelers whose tight schedules would now be disrupted, and a palpable tension among those who had witnessed the confrontation. "This is ridiculous," a man in economy complained loudly. "We're going to miss our connections because of some fight." In first class, the atmosphere was entirely different. Karen Blackwell sat rigidly in her seat, wrists secured to the armrest with plastic restraints, her earlier bravado replaced by a strategic alternation between tearful pleas and venomous threats. "Please," she sobbed to Timothy Howard across the aisle, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. I barely touched her." When Howard deliberately looked away, her tone shifted instantly. "You'll all be hearing from my lawyers. Do you have any idea how much influence my husband has? He plays golf with the governor. He funds half the police department in Dallas." The security team had efficiently reorganized the cabin, creating a buffer zone around both Karen and Jasmine. Darius remained standing near Jasmine, while another team member kept watch over Karen. The remaining 4 had positioned themselves strategically throughout first class, communicating occasionally via their earpieces. Trent approached Jasmine with a first aid kit, offering her an ice pack for her swollen lip. "I'm so sorry about what happened, Ms. Wright. I've never seen anything like this in 15 years of flying." "Not your fault," Jasmine replied, wincing slightly as she pressed the ice to her lip. The initial shock had worn off, leaving her angry but focused. This wasn't how she had planned to spend the day before her major presentation, but years of dealing with unexpected challenges in the corporate world had taught her adaptability. Professor Davis leaned forward from his seat. Are you alright? That was absolutely unconscionable behavior. I've been better, Jasmine admitted with a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I've also been worse. I recorded everything, Layla Patterson said quietly, showing Jasmine her phone. From the moment she started making those comments. If you need evidence for charges, it's all here. Karen, overhearing this, lunged forward against her restraints. You were recording me without consent. That's illegal. I'll sue you too. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recordings, Professor Davis remarked calmly. And I believe the airline's terms of service include consent to being recorded on board. I teach law at Columbia, he added with a small smile. Karen's assistant Tracy, who had been summoned from economy class when the incident escalated, stood awkwardly in the aisle, clearly wanting to distance herself from her employer. I want to be clear that I don't share Ms. Blackwell's views, she said to no one in particular. I've only been working for her for 3 months. Darius nodded professionally to Jasmine. Your father has arranged for medical attention to meet us at the gate. He's also contacted our legal team and is flying to Denver himself. That's really not necessary, Jasmine sighed. It's just a split lip. Standard protocol for any assault on a Wright family member, Darius replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. Your father implemented these security measures for good reason. There have been 3 credible threats against your family in the past year alone. Jasmine frowned. Her father had mentioned increased security concerns but had spared her the details. Now she understood why he'd insisted on the security team, though she wished they had made their presence known to her from the beginning. Timothy Howard, who had maintained a careful silence throughout most of the confrontation, finally spoke. Ms. Wright, I didn't realize who you were until all this happened. I've actually met your father several times at industry events. Brilliant man. I'm with Techron Solutions. Thank you, Jasmine acknowledged, recognizing the name of a potential partner company. Though I wish we could have met under better circumstances. Don't we all, Howard replied, casting a disgusted glance toward Karen, who was now quietly weeping in what appeared to be a calculated attempt to generate sympathy. As the plane began its final descent, Jasmine reflected on the familiar pattern playing out, the racism, the confrontation, and now the tears and victimhood from the perpetrator. She had seen this cycle before, though rarely with such dramatic consequences. The memories surfaced unbidden, being followed by security in high-end stores despite carrying a premium credit card, the college professor who had accused her of plagiarism because her paper was too well written, the real estate agent who had tried to steer her away from viewing properties in certain neighborhoods despite her budget. Each incident had built her resilience, but also reinforced her father's warnings about the world she navigated. The aircraft touched down with a slight bump, taxiing toward a remote gate where 3 police vehicles and an ambulance waited on the tarmac. The captain's voice came over the intercom once more. Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Denver. Due to the nature of our unscheduled landing, local authorities will be boarding the aircraft. All passengers will need to remain seated until further instructions. We apologize for any inconvenience and thank you for your cooperation. A collective groan rose from the economy section, while in first class, tension mounted as everyone waited for the inevitable law enforcement response. Karen had composed herself, sitting straighter and adjusting her expression to one of wounded dignity. I want to press charges for false imprisonment, she announced to no one in particular. These men attacked me and restrained me without cause. Actually, Layla countered, holding up her phone, I have the entire incident recorded, including you following Ms. Wright to the galley, making racist comments, and physically assaulting her. Would you like me to show the police when they arrive, or would you prefer to stop making false accusations? The cabin door opened, and 3 police officers boarded, followed by airline representatives. They conferred briefly with the flight attendants before approaching first class. I'm the victim here. Karen called out immediately. These men restrained me without cause. I want them all arrested. The lead officer, a stern-faced woman with captain's bars, looked from Karen to Jasmine's injured lip, then to Darius. We received reports of an assault on a passenger. Can someone explain what happened here? Multiple voices began speaking at once until the officer held up her hand. One at a time, please. Trent stepped forward. Ms. Blackwell verbally harassed Ms. Wright with racist comments throughout the flight, followed her to the galley, and then physically assaulted her, causing the injury to her lip. The security personnel intervened to prevent further assault. She's lying. Karen interjected. I was defending myself. They're all conspiring against me. We have video evidence, Layla offered, holding up her phone. I recorded most of the interaction. The officer nodded. We'll need to see that. Everyone involved will need to deplane and provide statements. The rest of the passengers will be allowed to continue their journey once we've secured the situation. As if on cue, the cabin door opened again, and Malcolm Wright himself entered the aircraft. At 55, he remained an imposing figure, tall and fit, with closely cropped salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. He wore a simple but impeccably tailored navy suit, his only concession to wealth being a discreet Patek Philippe watch that matched his daughter's. Dad? Jasmine's surprise was evident. How did you get here so fast? I was in Chicago when Darius alerted me. Private jet, he replied tersely, his eyes quickly assessing her injury before softening. Are you alright, Jazz? I'm fine, she assured him. It's just a small cut. Malcolm nodded, then turned to the police captain, extending his hand. Malcolm Wright. Thank you for responding so quickly. My daughter was assaulted by that woman, he indicated Karen with a slight nod, in what appears to be a racially motivated attack. Karen's eyes widened with recognition, the color draining from her face as she realized who stood before her. Mr. Wright, she began, her voice suddenly honeyed, this has all been a terrible misunderstanding. Save it for your statement, the captain interrupted. Mr. Wright, we'll need statements from everyone involved, including your security personnel. We'll conduct interviews at the station. Malcolm nodded. Of course. My legal team is already en route. As the passengers began to deplane, the gravity of the situation finally seemed to dawn on Karen. Her husband might have influence in Dallas, but here in Denver, faced with video evidence, multiple witnesses, and the personal involvement of one of the most powerful tech moguls in America, her usual tactics would find little traction. The security team escorted Jasmine and Malcolm to the terminal while police officers removed Karen's restraints only to replace them with official handcuffs. As she was led past Jasmine, Karen attempted one final approach. Please, she whispered, all pretense gone, I have children. This will ruin me. Can't we work something out? Jasmine met her gaze steadily. You should have thought about consequences before you put your hands on me. As Karen was escorted away, Malcolm placed a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. The company jet is waiting. We can have you in LA in time for your meeting tomorrow. What about the other passengers? Jasmine asked, looking back at the plane. Their travel plans are disrupted because of this. Malcolm smiled slightly. Already handled. The airline is arranging alternative transportation for everyone, and I've authorized compensation for their inconvenience. No one will miss connections because of this. Professor Davis approached them as they waited in the terminal. Ms. Wright, Mr. Wright, he nodded respectfully. Andre Davis, Columbia Law. I just wanted to say that your composure was admirable, young lady. And to offer my contact information as a witness, should you need it. Thank you, Professor, Jasmine replied sincerely. As they headed toward the private aviation terminal, Malcolm studied his daughter's face. You're angry with me about the security team. It wasn't a question. Their relationship had always been characterized by directness. You could have told me they'd be there, Jasmine replied. I'm not a child, Dad. No, "You're something far more valuable, you're my heir, the future of everything I've built," Malcolm said quietly. "And unfortunately, that makes you a target. The security team is non-negotiable, Jazz. Especially after today." Jasmine sighed, knowing this was one battle she wouldn't win. As they walked through the terminal, she couldn't help noticing how many people were already recording on their phones, whispering as they passed. In the digital age, she knew, this incident would be trending on social media before they even reached Los Angeles. The thought both exhausted and strengthened her. Perhaps some good might come from having this ugly reality exposed to the world. The sleek private jet touched down at Los Angeles International Airport just after sunset, the city lights spreading below them like a glittering carpet. Jasmine had spent most of the 3-hour flight from Denver in the jet's conference room, participating in virtual meetings with Skyward's legal team and preparing for tomorrow's acquisition talks. Despite the day's upheaval, business continued. Malcolm entered as she was reviewing her presentation one final time. "The media's picked up the story," he said without preamble, setting his tablet before her. Jasmine scanned the headlines with a growing sense of unease. Flight diverted after Black tech heiress assaulted. Billionaire's security team forces emergency landing. Racial confrontation grounds united flight. "It's everywhere," Malcolm continued. "The video is trending. Hashtag first class while black is the top hashtag on Twitter." Jasmine sighed, scrolling through the coverage. Some outlets portrayed her sympathetically as the victim of an unprovoked racist attack. Others focused more sensationally on the "billionaire's daughter" angle, or questioned whether the security response had been excessive. "They're painting me as either a helpless victim or a privileged princess who overreacted," she observed. "Fascinating how few can see me as simply a professional who was assaulted while trying to do her job." Malcolm squeezed her shoulder gently. "Welcome to the intersection of racism and wealth, Jazz. You confound their narratives." The pilot announced their final approach, and they returned to their seats. A car was waiting on the tarmac, another security measure that now felt less like parental overprotection and more like necessary caution given the media firestorm. "There's a press contingent at the hotel," Darius informed them as they settled into the black SUV. "We've arranged a side entrance, but they're persistent." Malcolm considered this. "We should make a statement. Get ahead of the narrative." "Dad," Jasmine began to protest. "Not you," Malcolm clarified. "Me. You focus on tomorrow's meeting. I'll handle the press." Within the hour, Malcolm Wright stood before a hastily assembled press conference in the hotel's conference room. Dressed in the same impeccable suit he'd worn all day, he projected calm authority as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. "I'll make a brief statement, then take a few questions," he began, silencing the crowd. "Today, my daughter Jasmine, who serves as Chief Operating Officer of Skyward Innovations, was verbally and physically assaulted on a commercial flight in what appears to be a racially motivated attack. The assailant has been arrested, and we are cooperating fully with authorities. We're grateful to the airline crew and law enforcement for their professional response." He paused, surveying the room of journalists. "What happened today is not an isolated incident. It is part of a pattern that many Black Americans experience daily, regardless of their education, position, or economic status. The only unusual aspect is that my daughter had security personnel present who could intervene." From her hotel suite, Jasmine watched the press conference on her laptop, appreciating her father's measured tone and dignified handling of the situation. When a reporter asked about the excessive response of diverting an entire commercial flight, Malcolm's answer was pointed. "If your child was bleeding from being struck in the face, would you consider protection excessive? The decision to divert was made by the airline after a passenger committed assault. The question you should be asking is not why the flight was diverted, but why a woman felt entitled to verbally abuse and then physically attack another passenger based on the color of her skin." The statement was met with a moment of chastened silence before the questions resumed. Meanwhile, Jasmine's phone was flooded with notifications. Colleagues expressing support, friends checking on her well-being, and increasingly, messages from strangers who had seen the video. Some shared their own experiences with racism, while others questioned her account or criticized the security response as privileged overreaction. A text from Layla Patterson caught her attention, the video's at 2 million views. "You okay with me speaking to reporters? They're persistent." Jasmine appreciated the consideration. "Yes, and thank you for recording it. Truth matters." She switched to news coverage of Karen Blackwell's arrest. The Dallas socialite had been booked at the Denver police station, her husband James conspicuously absent when she was released on bail hours later. Initial statements from her hastily retained attorney claimed she had experienced a temporary stress-induced episode and deeply regretted any misunderstanding. Social media was less forgiving. Amateur detectives were already digging into Karen's background, unearthing complaints from former household staff about racist treatment and reports of previous incidents at her country club where she had demanded black servers be replaced. A knock at the door interrupted her scrolling. Darius entered after her acknowledgement, his professional demeanor slightly softened by concern. "Your father asked me to check on you. The hotel security has been reinforced, and we've swept the suite." "Thank you, Darius," she replied, then hesitated. "Have there been threats?" He maintained a neutral expression. "Nothing specific or credible. Standard precaution." Jasmine nodded, understanding what remained unspoken. High-profile racial incidents often triggered backlash from both sides. For every supportive message, there would be those who viewed her as playing the race card or leveraging her father's wealth for sympathy. After Darius left, Jasmine returned to her preparation, determined not to let the day's events derail tomorrow's critical meeting. The acquisition of Neural Dynamics would position Skyward at the forefront of artificial intelligence development, potentially revolutionizing how their security software operated. Her phone rang, an unknown Denver number. Curious, she answered. "Ms. Wright? This is Detective Lisa Hernandez from Denver PD. I have a few follow-up questions about today's incident if you have a moment." "Of course, Detective. Ms. Blackwell's attorney is claiming you antagonized her and that her response, while regrettable, was provoked. Do you have any comment?" Jasmine's grip tightened on the phone. "Detective, there were at least 20 witnesses, multiple flight attendants, and video evidence. I was seated quietly working when Ms. Blackwell began making increasingly aggressive racist comments. When I attempted to remove myself from the situation, she followed me and assaulted me. Any claim of provocation is a transparent attempt to shift blame." "Understood. Just doing due diligence," the detective replied. "The video evidence is pretty clear. We'll be proceeding with assault charges, potentially with a hate crime enhancement depending on the DA's assessment." After completing the call, Jasmine sat motionless for several minutes, processing the day's events. The familiar pattern was playing out, the initial incident, followed by denial, victim blaming, and attempts to rewrite the narrative. Her laptop chimed with an incoming email. The sender made her sit up straight, James Blackwell, Karen's husband and CEO of Blackwell Oil. The subject line read simply, "My sincere apologies." Jasmine hesitated before opening it, suspicious of the timing. The message was brief. "Ms. Wright. I want to express my profound apologies for my wife's inexcusable behavior today. There is no justification for what occurred, and I am deeply ashamed. Karen's actions do not reflect my values or those of our family. I understand you're in LA for the Neural Dynamics acquisition. You may be surprised to learn that I'm an investor in Neural Dynamics and was planning to attend tomorrow's meeting. Given the circumstances, I will recuse myself from the proceedings. If you're willing, I would appreciate the opportunity to apologize in person at an appropriate time. Respectfully. James Blackwell." The revelation stunned her. James Blackwell was involved with Neural Dynamics. She immediately called her father, who arrived at her suite minutes later. "Did you know about this connection?" she demanded, showing him the email. Malcolm's expression darkened as he read. No. Our due diligence didn't flag Blackwell as an investor. He must be using a shell company. He looked up. This complicates things. You want to cancel the deal, Jasmine stated, reading his thoughts. It's tainted now, Malcolm replied. How can we do business with someone connected to what happened today? Jasmine paced the room, thinking rapidly. That's exactly what Karen would want, for this incident to derail a major business opportunity for us. Neural Dynamics is the best AI company on the market, and their technology is perfect for our needs. Principles matter more than profit, Jazz. I taught you that. Yes, you did, she agreed. But is canceling this deal actually principled, or is it emotional? If James Blackwell is willing to recuse himself, shouldn't we judge the company on its merits? Malcolm studied his daughter with newfound respect. Despite everything she'd endured today, she was thinking strategically rather than reactively. We'll discuss it with the board in the morning, he conceded. For now, get some rest. You've had one hell of a day. After her father left, Jasmine couldn't resist doing some research of her own. A deep dive into Karen Blackwell revealed something fascinating. Before marrying James 15 years ago, Karen Miller had been a flight attendant from a working-class background in Ohio. Her transformation into a Dallas socialite had been complete, her previous life erased from public records. As Jasmine finally prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a text from a former classmate who had seen the news. OMG Jazz, that woman who attacked you. I grew up in the same neighborhood as her in Cleveland. She was Karen Miller back then. Total reinvention when she married Blackwell. Always trying to prove she belonged with the rich folks. Jasmine stared at the message, pieces falling into place. Karen's excessive performance of wealth and status, her heightened sensitivity to perceived threats to that status, her specific targeting of successful black people who represented a challenge to her narrative of deserved privilege, it all stemmed from profound insecurity about her own background. The irony wasn't lost on Jasmine. While she had never hidden her family's wealth, she also never defined herself by it. Karen, it seemed, had built her entire identity on a foundation of pretense and exclusion, terrified that someone might see through the facade. As she drifted toward sleep, Jasmine wondered if this understanding should evoke sympathy. Perhaps, but it didn't excuse actions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she had survived today's battle, as she had so many before. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room at Skyward's Los Angeles office. Jasmine stood at the head of the table, her presentation on the Neural Dynamics acquisition projected onto the wall behind her. Despite the previous day's trauma, she was fully composed, her split lip concealed with expert makeup application, her voice strong and confident as she outlined the strategic benefits of the merger. Neural Dynamics' proprietary algorithms represent a quantum leap forward in pattern recognition, she explained to the assembled board members and executives. Integrating their AI capabilities with our security framework will put us years ahead of competitors. Malcolm watched from his seat with quiet pride. He had offered to lead the meeting himself, giving her time to recover, but Jasmine had refused. This is my project, she had insisted. I won't let yesterday's incident derail it. As she fielded questions with ease, demonstrating her thorough understanding of both the technical and financial aspects of the acquisition, Malcolm reflected on how much she had grown. At 26, Jasmine possessed a poise and resilience that many executives twice her age lacked. Yesterday's incident, while infuriating, had also revealed her strength in crisis, maintaining composure, refusing to be baited into an emotional response that could be weaponized against her later. The meeting concluded with unanimous approval for proceeding with the acquisition. As the board members filed out, congratulating Jasmine on her presentation, Malcolm's phone buzzed with a news alert. The video's gone national, he informed her once they were alone. All the major networks are running it. The airlines issued a statement condemning the behavior and announcing a review of their training procedures for handling discrimination incidents. Jasmine nodded, unsurprised. And Karen Blackwell? Silent on advice of counsel. But the internet is having a field day with her past. Someone leaked her employment records from the airline. Turns out your assailant was once a flight attendant herself. I know, Jasmine replied, showing him the text from her former classmate. It explains a lot, doesn't it? Her performance of wealth, her desperation to separate herself from service workers. Malcolm shook his head. Trying to climb the social ladder by stepping on others. Tale as old as time. Their conversation was interrupted by Jasmine's assistant announcing an unexpected visitor. James Blackwell had arrived at the office, requesting a brief meeting. Malcolm and Jasmine exchanged glances. Your call, Malcolm said. You're the one she assaulted. After a moment's consideration, Jasmine nodded. I'll see him. But I want you there. James Blackwell cut a starkly different figure from his wife. Where Karen had been all flashy designer labels and ostentatious jewelry, James was understated in a simple gray suit, his demeanor subdued as he was shown into Malcolm's office. In his late 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of old money rather than the aggressive display of the newly wealthy. Ms. Wright, Mr. Wright, he began, declining the offered seat. I won't take much of your time. I simply wanted to personally express my profound regret for my wife's inexcusable behavior. There is no justification for what occurred. Malcolm's expression remained neutral. Yet your wife's attorney is already spinning a narrative of provocation. James winced visibly. Against my explicit instructions. I've since retained separate counsel for Karen. The statement claiming provocation has been retracted. He turned to Jasmine. Ms. Wright, I cannot begin to apologize adequately for what you experienced. Karen's actions reflect a side of her I've been unwilling to acknowledge for too long. Our marriage has been troubled for several years. Mr. Blackwell, Jasmine replied evenly, while I appreciate your apology, I'm curious about the timing of your visit. You mentioned in your email that you're an investor in Neural Dynamics, the company we're currently acquiring. Is this apology personal or business? The directness of the question seemed to catch him off guard. After a moment, he responded with equal frankness. Both, if I'm honest. What Karen did was reprehensible, regardless of any business connections. But yes, I do have concerns about how this incident might affect the Neural Dynamics deal. You invested through a shell company, Malcolm observed. Why the secrecy? James hesitated. Oil and tech don't always mix well in today's climate. I've been diversifying my holdings quietly. Neural Dynamics represents the future in ways that fossil fuels don't. And now you're worried we'll pull out of the deal because of your wife's actions, Jasmine concluded. It would be understandable if you did, James acknowledged. But it would also punish a promising company and its employees for something entirely unrelated to their work. Jasmine studied him thoughtfully. Mr. Blackwell, I have one question. Did you know about the incident before you sent that email last night? I knew there had been some kind of altercation on a flight involving Karen, he admitted. I didn't know the details or that you were involved until the video started circulating. By then, Karen had already been arrested in Denver. And you didn't go to her? Malcolm asked. A flicker of something, pain, perhaps, or resignation, crossed James's face. Our relationship has reached a breaking point. This incident was the final straw in a pattern of behavior I can no longer ignore or excuse. I filed for divorce this morning. The blunt admission hung in the air. Jasmine exchanged a glance with her father before responding. The Neural Dynamics acquisition will proceed as planned, she said finally. Business and personal matters should remain separate when possible. However, we will require your complete recusal from any involvement in the company going forward. Relief washed over James's features. Of course. I've already directed my investment team to arrange for divestiture of my shares as part of the acquisition. You won't have to deal with any Blackwell connection once the deal is complete. As James prepared to leave, he paused. There's something else you should know about Karen. Something that might provide context, though not excuse. We're aware of her background, Jasmine said. The flight attendant from Cleveland who reinvented herself. James looked momentarily surprised. Yes. Karen came from nothing, much like you did, Mr. Wright, he nodded to Malcolm. The difference is in how you both responded to acquiring wealth. While you built something meaningful, Karen has spent 15 years terrified of being exposed as an imposter. She's constructed an identity entirely around belongings and status, and viciously guards against anything that threatens that facade. Including successful black people who challenge her narrative about who deserves wealth and status, Jasmine observed. Precisely, James acknowledged sadly. In her worldview, your very existence is threatening because it contradicts the story she tells herself about why she deserves her position while others don't. He shook his head. I enabled it for too long, making excuses for Karen being Karen. I'm sorry it took something this extreme to make me face reality. After James departed, Malcolm turned to his daughter. What do you think? I think he's genuinely sorry, both about what happened and about his role in creating the monster his wife became, Jasmine replied. But I also think the neural dynamics deal is more important to him than he's letting on. Malcolm nodded. People are complex. Self-interest and genuine remorse can coexist. Before they could discuss further, Jasmine's phone buzzed with an alert, another media request, this time for a major television interview. She declined automatically, as she had with all previous requests. You should consider it, Malcolm suggested. This incident has given you a platform. You could use it to address the larger issue. Jasmine hesitated. I've never wanted to be the face of racism in America, Dad. I'm a businesswoman, not an activist. Sometimes life chooses our battles for us, Malcolm replied gently. This incident resonates with people because it exposes the lie that success shields us from racism. You handled it with dignity and strength. That matters. After consideration, Jasmine agreed to one carefully selected interview, with a respected journalist known for substantive reporting rather than sensationalism. The conversation was scheduled for the following day, after the Neural Dynamics acquisition was finalized. That evening, as Jasmine prepared in her hotel suite, she received another unexpected message, this one from Karen Blackwell herself. Ms. Wright, I know you have no reason to speak with me, but I'm asking for 10 minutes of your time tomorrow. Not for forgiveness, but for accountability. I've checked myself into a treatment facility in Denver and am beginning therapy to address my issues. If you're willing, please have your security team contact mine to arrange a meeting. Jasmine stared at the message, wondering if it represented genuine remorse or simply another performance for potential jurors and public opinion. Perhaps there was only one way to find out. The Denver courthouse stood as a monument to justice, imposing stone columns flanking wide steps, the American flag snapping in the crisp morning breeze. 1 week after the incident that had captivated the nation, Jasmine Wright ascended those steps, surrounded by her security team and legal counsel. The media presence was overwhelming, cameras tracking her every move, reporters shouting questions that blended into unintelligible noise. Inside, the atmosphere was marginally more controlled, though the courtroom was packed to capacity. The case had been fast-tracked due to its high profile and the overwhelming evidence. Today's hearing would address the charges against Karen Blackwell, assault and battery, with the district attorney pushing for a hate crime enhancement that would significantly increase potential penalties. Jasmine sat beside the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Chen who had built her reputation prosecuting hate crimes. Malcolm sat directly behind her, a silent pillar of support. On the other side of the aisle, Karen Blackwell presented a startlingly different appearance from the woman who had boarded that flight a week ago. Gone were the designer clothes and ostentatious jewelry, replaced by a modest navy blue suit. Her previously highlighted blonde hair was pulled back simply, her makeup minimal. The transformation was so complete it seemed almost calculated, the visual embodiment of contrition and humility. Her attorney, a distinguished older man named Harrison Powell, leaned close, whispering final instructions as the judge entered and proceedings began. The initial formalities moved quickly, charges read, procedural matters addressed. Then came the moment of tension, Karen's plea. "How does the defendant plead to the charges of assault and battery?" the judge inquired. Powell stood. "Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of guilty to the charge of assault and battery." A murmur ran through the courtroom. A guilty plea had been rumored but not confirmed until this moment. The judge called for silence before continuing. "And to the hate crime enhancement?" Powell cleared his throat. "We contest the enhancement, Your Honor. While my client admits to the physical assault, we maintain that racial animus was not a motivating factor." The prosecutor stood immediately. "Your Honor, we have substantial evidence, including recorded statements made by the defendant before and during the assault, that clearly demonstrate racial bias as a primary motivator." "We'll address that during today's hearing," the judge decided. "Ms. Blackwell, you understand that by pleading guilty to the assault charge, you waive certain rights, including the right to a trial by jury on that count?" "I do, Your Honor," Karen replied, her voice barely audible. The next hour was devoted to establishing the basic facts of the case. The prosecutor presented the video evidence, flight attendant statements, and testimony from passengers. The defense did not contest these facts, focusing instead on Karen's mental state and arguing against the hate crime classification. When it came time for cross-examination, Powell adopted a sympathetic tone toward Jasmine. "Ms. Wright, first let me say how sorry my client is for what occurred on that flight. No one should experience such treatment." He paused, adjusting his approach. "During the incident, did my client ever explicitly mention race or use racial slurs?" "She didn't need to use slurs," Jasmine replied evenly. "She repeatedly made assumptions about my economic status based solely on my appearance as a black woman. She questioned whether I belonged in first class, suggested I had obtained my watch illegally, and made references to affirmative action and welfare programs. The racial component was unmistakable." Powell nodded thoughtfully. "I understand how those comments could be interpreted that way. But isn't it possible that my client's behavior stemmed from class anxiety rather than racial animus? That she might have reacted similarly to anyone she perceived as threatening her status?" Before Jasmine could answer, the prosecutor objected. "Your Honor, counsel is asking the witness to speculate about the defendant's mental state." "Sustained," the judge agreed. "Mr. Powell, confine your questions to what the witness directly experienced." The defense attorney shifted tactics. "Ms. Wright, would you say the security team's response might have escalated the situation? 6 armed men surrounding my client could certainly have contributed to a sense of panic on her part. The security team did not intervene until after your client had physically assaulted me," Jasmine pointed out. "They responded to violence that had already occurred, not the other way around." As the questioning continued, Karen Blackwell sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the table before her. Only occasionally did she glance toward Jasmine, her expression unreadable. When it was time for Karen to testify, she moved to the witness stand with visible trepidation. After being sworn in, she faced the courtroom, hands clasped tightly before her. "Ms. Blackwell," her attorney began gently, "please tell the court about your background and the events leading up to this incident." Karen took a deep breath. "I grew up in Cleveland, in a neighborhood where we struggled to make ends meet. My father left when I was young, and my mother worked multiple jobs. I started working at 16, eventually becoming a flight attendant after high school." Her voice trembled slightly. "That job was my escape. I served first-class passengers for years, watching how they lived, how they were treated with respect and deference." The courtroom listened in silence as she continued. "When I met James, it was like a fairy tale. Suddenly I was thrust into a world of wealth and privilege I'd only observed from the outside. I was terrified of being exposed as an imposter, of being sent back to the life I'd escaped." "And how does this relate to the incident with Ms. Wright?" Powell prompted. Karen's composure suddenly cracked. To everyone's surprise, including apparently her own attorney, she abandoned what seemed to be prepared remarks. "I can't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't sit here and pretend this was about anything other than what it was." She looked directly at Jasmine for the first time. "The truth is, seeing successful black people like Ms. Wright triggers something ugly in me. Something I've tried to ignore or justify." Her attorney moved to interrupt, but Karen continued, the words pouring out like a confession. "I've spent 15 years constructing this identity as a wealthy woman who deserves her status. And people like Ms. Wright, accomplished, educated, dignified, they challenge the narrative I've built about who belongs in first class and who doesn't. Who deserves wealth and who doesn't." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge called for order as Powell whispered urgently to his client, but Karen shook her head, determined to continue. "I don't expect forgiveness. What I did was inexcusable. But I want the court to know that I'm facing the truth about myself for the first time. The assault was racially motivated. My behavior on that flight was racist, and it reflected patterns of thought I've harbored for years while pretending to be something I'm not." The judge called for a 15-minute recess to allow Powell to confer with his client. As the courtroom emptied, Jasmine remained seated, processing Karen's unexpected confession. "That wasn't what her lawyer had planned," Malcolm observed quietly. "No," Jasmine agreed. "I think that might have been the first honest moment Karen Blackwell has had in 15 years." When court reconvened, Powell announced that his client was amending her plea to accept the hate crime enhancement. The judge accepted the change and moved to sentencing considerations. In an unusual turn, the judge addressed Jasmine directly. "Ms. Wright, as the victim in this case, you have the right to make an impact statement before sentencing. Would you like to do so?" Jasmine approached the podium, facing the courtroom with the same dignity she'd maintained throughout the ordeal. Her prepared statement remained folded in her pocket, suddenly inadequate for the moment. "Your Honor, what happened on that flight wasn't just about me. It was about a pattern that plays out across America every day, the assumption that black success is somehow suspect, unearned, or illegitimate. The only unusual aspect of my experience is that it was recorded and that I had resources to ensure accountability." She glanced briefly at Karen before continuing. "I don't take pleasure in Ms. Blackwell's public humiliation or legal consequences. But I do believe in accountability, and I believe that addressing racism requires confronting uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our society." Jasmine paused, considering her next words carefully. "I respect Ms. Blackwell's honesty today. Acknowledging the racial motivation behind her actions is an important first step. I hope that whatever sentence the court imposes includes education and community service components that might transform this incident into an opportunity for growth rather than merely punishment." After brief arguments from both attorneys, the judge rendered her decision. Karen would receive a suspended jail sentence, 5 years probation, mandatory counseling for anger management and racial bias, and 2,000 hours of community service to be performed at a youth center in a predominantly black neighborhood in South Dallas. "Ms. Blackwell," the judge concluded, "you have shown genuine remorse today, which I've taken into account. However, actions have consequences. I believe this sentence balances accountability with rehabilitation. You'll have the opportunity to examine the beliefs that led to this incident and hopefully emerge a better person." As the proceedings concluded, Jasmine moved quickly through the courthouse, avoiding further media interaction. Outside, she was surprised to find Karen waiting beside a court officer, away from the press. "Ms. Wright," Karen began hesitantly. "I know you requested to speak with me privately yesterday. I didn't expect what happened in court today, but I meant what I said. If you're still willing to talk, I'm ready to listen." Jasmine studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a private conference room the court had made available. Once inside, with only Darius present for security, the two women faced each other across a simple table, so different from their first confrontation in the airplane galley. "I didn't request this meeting to hear more apologies," Jasmine began. I wanted to understand. Karen nodded, her hands clasped tightly on the table. What do you want to know? The transformation in court today, was that genuine, or another performance? Karen flinched slightly at the directness but maintained eye contact. It wasn't planned, if that's what you're asking. My lawyer wanted me to argue diminished capacity due to stress and anxiety. The confession, that wasn't part of the strategy. Then why? Because sitting there, watching the video, hearing the witnesses, I couldn't hide from myself anymore. Karen's voice was steady now, the polished socialite veneer completely gone. For 15 years, I've been playing a role so completely I almost believed it myself. But the woman on that video? That's who I became when I felt threatened. And it's ugly. Jasmine leaned forward slightly. You know what's interesting? My father also came from nothing. He grew up in the Bronx, raised by a single mother who cleaned houses. But his response to acquiring wealth was completely different from yours. He built something meaningful, Karen acknowledged. I just consumed. Collected status symbols like armor. And treated anyone who challenged your narrative as an enemy to be destroyed, Jasmine added. Karen didn't deny it. I've started therapy as part of my plea agreement. My therapist says I've been living with constant imposter syndrome, terrified of being found out. But instead of acknowledging that fear, I projected it onto others, especially successful Black people who triggered my insecurities about deserving wealth. That explanation helps me understand, Jasmine said carefully. But it doesn't erase what happened. I know, Karen replied. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I'm finally facing the truth about myself. James' filing for divorce was actually clarifying. Everything I feared losing is gone now, and somehow that's freeing. I can't hide behind wealth or status anymore. Jasmine considered this. What will you do now? Complete my community service. Continue therapy. Try to become someone better than who I've been. Karen hesitated. The youth center where I'll be working, the judge mentioned I'll be teaching business skills. That's actually something I can do. Before I was Karen Blackwell, socialite, I managed airline crews and balanced complicated schedules. Those are real skills I buried under designer labels. The conversation concluded without dramatic reconciliation or forgiveness, just two women acknowledging a painful truth and the possibility of growth from it. As they prepared to leave, Karen asked one final question. If you don't mind my asking, why did you recommend community service rather than jail time? After what I did, no one would have blamed you for wanting the maximum penalty. Jasmine paused at the door. Because locking you away wouldn't address the underlying problem. The youth you'll work with at that center deserve to see someone confront their biases and change. That's worth more than seeing you punished. As Jasmine left the courthouse, Malcolm was waiting with news. In response to the case, he had announced a new corporate initiative, the Right Equity Project, dedicated to addressing systemic racism in corporate America through measurable accountability metrics, mentorship programs, and educational resources. Jasmine would head the foundation alongside her COO duties. It won't solve everything, Malcolm acknowledged, but it's a start. Making something constructive from this mess. Jasmine nodded, thinking of Karen's unexpected transformation in court. Sometimes people can surprise you, even yourself. 6 months later, the South Dallas Youth Center bustled with activity as teenagers gathered for the weekly business skills workshop. The classroom, once dreary with institutional beige walls and flickering fluorescent lights, had been transformed with fresh paint, new technology, and student artwork depicting scenes of entrepreneurship and community development. At the front of the room stood Karen Blackwell, though she now used her maiden name, Miller. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully maintained appearance of the Dallas socialite. This Karen wore simple slacks and a button-down shirt, her hair pulled back naturally, her face free of the heavy makeup that had once been her mask. Today we're discussing financial literacy, she explained to the group of 15 teenagers, most of them Black and Latino. Who can tell me the difference between an asset and a liability? A girl in the front row raised her hand. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. Excellent, Shanice, Karen nodded approvingly. Now let's talk about how to recognize the difference when making purchasing decisions. The teenagers were engaged, asking questions and participating actively in the discussion. When Karen had first arrived to complete her community service hours, she'd been met with open hostility and suspicion. The video of her assault on Jasmine Wright had gone viral, making her instantly recognizable as that racist lady from the plane. For weeks, students had refused to engage, sitting silently with arms crossed or making pointed comments about her presence. Karen had persisted, showing up consistently and approaching the work with genuine humility. She never made excuses for her past behavior, acknowledging when asked that she was there because she had done something terrible and was working to be better. Gradually, her knowledge of business operations and financial management had earned her a grudging respect from the teens, many of whom had entrepreneurial ambitions but limited access to mentorship. As the class broke into small groups for an exercise on building personal budgets, the center's director appeared in the doorway, gesturing for Karen's attention. "You have a visitor," she said quietly. Karen looked up, surprised, then froze when she saw who stood in the hallway. Jasmine Wright, elegant in a simple black pantsuit, waited calmly outside the classroom. Their paths hadn't crossed since that day at the courthouse 6 months earlier. "Can you watch the class for a few minutes?" Karen asked one of the program assistants before stepping into the hallway, her heart racing with unexpected anxiety. "Ms. Wright," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." Jasmine's expression was neutral but not unkind. "I'm in Dallas for business and wanted to see how the program was going. The Wright Equity Project is considering a partnership with this center." Karen nodded, unsure how to navigate this unexpected reunion. "They do incredible work here. These kids have so much potential." An awkward silence stretched between them, laden with the weight of their shared history. "Your class seems engaged," Jasmine observed finally. "The director says you've become one of their most effective instructors." "I don't know about that," Karen replied, genuine modesty replacing her former performative humility. "But I do know business operations. And I understand what it's like to feel like the system is stacked against you, even if my response to that feeling was destructive." Jasmine studied her thoughtfully. "May I observe your class?" Karen hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Of course." Back in the classroom, the students looked up curiously as Jasmine entered, several recognizing her immediately from news coverage of the incident. "Yo, that's Jasmine Wright," whispered one boy to his neighbor, not quite quietly enough. "The lady from the plane video." Karen addressed the class directly, preferring transparency to awkward pretense. "Everyone, we have a visitor today. This is Jasmine Wright, Chief Operating Officer of Skyward Innovations. She's considering a partnership between her foundation and our center." The students straightened in their seats, suddenly more attentive. Jasmine took a seat at the back of the room, observing as Karen guided the class through the budget exercise with surprising effectiveness. She noticed how Karen connected with the students, sharing practical knowledge without condescension, acknowledging their lived experiences while expanding their financial vocabulary. When the class ended, several students approached Jasmine with questions about tech careers and business management. She answered them thoughtfully, impressed by their ambition and preparation. As the room cleared, Karen gathered her materials, giving Jasmine space for these interactions. Finally, when only the two women remained, Jasmine spoke. "You're good at this." "Thank you," Karen replied simply. "It's fulfilling work. More than I expected." "What happened to all the designer clothes and jewelry?" Jasmine asked, noting Karen's modest attire. "Sold most of it," Karen answered. "The divorce settlement was less generous than I'd expected. James had a solid prenup." But honestly, it's been liberating. Living authentically instead of constantly performing wealth is freeing. They walked together toward the center's entrance, their conversation guarded but civil. I heard about your foundation's work, Karen said. The accountability metrics for corporate diversity. It's making waves in the business community. Jasmine nodded. That's the goal. Measurable change, not just empty promises. Outside the center, Karen paused. I want to thank you, she said quietly. For what? For recommending community service instead of jail time. For giving me the chance to actually face what I did and why I did it. Karen met Jasmine's gaze directly. I've been in therapy twice a week since the hearing. Unpacking a lifetime of class anxiety and racial bias isn't quick or easy. But this work, with these kids, it's been transformative. They don't care about designer labels or country club memberships. They just want someone who respects them and teaches them useful skills. Jasmine considered this. I didn't do it for you, she said honestly. I did it because punishment alone doesn't create change. These students deserve to see someone acknowledge their biases and work to overcome them. I understand, Karen nodded. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. Some things can't be undone. But I am grateful for the opportunity to become someone better than I was. As they prepared to part ways, Jasmine handed Karen a business card. The foundation is looking for instructors who can connect with underserved communities. When your community service hours are complete, send me your curriculum. We might have opportunities for someone with your experience. The offer wasn't friendship or forgiveness, it was professional recognition of Karen's genuine change and effective teaching. Karen accepted the card with quiet gratitude, understanding the significance of this small gesture of professional respect. Later that afternoon, Malcolm's private jet carried Jasmine back to New York. The Neural Dynamics acquisition had been finalized months ago, transforming Skyward's AI capabilities as predicted. The Wright Equity Project had launched to significant media attention, with corporations across America scrambling to implement its accountability frameworks. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from her father, "How was Dallas?" She typed back, "Productive. The center's doing great work. And Karen Miller has actually become an effective teacher." Malcolm's response came quickly, "People can surprise you." Sometimes, Jasmine agreed. She gazed out the window at the expanding horizon as the plane climbed through cloud cover. The incident that had begun on that commercial flight had rippled outward in ways she couldn't have anticipated, creating unexpected opportunities for change and growth. The following week, Jasmine boarded another commercial flight, this time by choice rather than necessity. The right jet had been available, but she had declined it, determined not to let one incident change how she moved through the world. Security still accompanied her, but more discreetly now, at her insistence. As she settled into her first-class seat, a white woman with 2 children was upgraded to the adjacent seat. The woman paused momentarily upon recognizing Jasmine, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she smiled and greeted her normally. "First time flying first class," she explained as she helped her children settle. "Special treat for the kids. They'll enjoy it," Jasmine replied warmly. The woman's young daughter leaned across the aisle. "I know you. You're the lady from the airplane video. My mom showed it to me and said you were really brave." "Sophia," her mother admonished, embarrassed. Jasmine laughed genuinely. "It's okay. And thank you, Sophia. Sometimes being brave just means standing up for yourself." As the flight attendants prepared for takeoff, Jasmine noticed Sophia and the boy across the aisle exchanging snacks and comparing tablet games, completely unconcerned with the adults' conversation. Their natural ease with each other offered a small moment of hope, a glimpse of a future where such incidents might become increasingly unthinkable. Jasmine texted her father one last message before switching to airplane mode: "Change happens one person at a time." As the plane accelerated down the runway, Jasmine looked out at the expanding horizon ahead, reflecting on how a single moment of confrontation had sparked a chain of transformations, in her own life, in Karen's, and perhaps, in some small way, in the broader conversation about race and privilege in America. The future, like the sky before them, stretched wide with possibility. What would you have done in Jasmine's position? Would you have recommended community service like she did, or pushed for a harsher punishment? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that real change comes not just through calling out injustice, but through creating opportunities for growth and transformation. Until next time. This story teaches us that racism persists regardless of wealth or status. For Jasmine Wright, her success and privilege couldn't shield her from discrimination, a reality many Black Americans face daily. The incident reveals how insecurity often fuels prejudice, as seen in Karen's desperate need to maintain her fabricated identity by putting others down. True transformation requires accountability. Karen's journey from racist aggressor to someone genuinely confronting her biases demonstrates that meaningful change demands honest self-reflection and concrete action, not just public apologies. The story also highlights the power of strategic responses to racism. Rather than seeking pure punishment, Jasmine chooses a path that creates potential for broader social impact through community service and education. Malcolm Wright's words that change happens one person at a time remind us that dismantling racism requires both systemic approaches and individual transformation. The Wright Equity Project represents institutional change, while Karen's personal evolution shows how individuals can grow when given the opportunity and motivation to confront their prejudices. Finally, the children's natural interaction across racial lines offers hope, suggesting that future generations might move beyond the biases that plague their parents' world. What moment in this story resonated with you most deeply? Was it Jasmine's dignity in the face of racism, Karen's eventual accountability, or perhaps the hopeful scene with the children on the final flight? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know which part of this journey touched your heart. If you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of accountability and transformation. Every conversation about racism brings us one step closer to meaningful change. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in second chances and the power of growth, and subscribe for more stories that challenge us to examine our society and ourselves. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey. Together, we can create a world where stories like this become relics of the past rather than reflections of our present.